I'm back with my no cap crew, Walter Clapp and Roger Scott. Today on the show, we have a very, very special guest, Matt Lewis. Matt Lewis is a political commentator and author of Filthy Rich Politicians and the almost like Nostradamus, Too Dumb to Fail. And he's also got a Substack called Matt Lewis in the Newsletter, where he does a weekly show with Charlie Sykes Monday at 10 a.m. just before this show today. So welcome, Matt, to the station. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Doing great.
So, anybody get hit with some snow recently? I heard that was in the news. Did it
Ice.
shut? Ice. Roger, how about you?
Yes, we got a little bit of snow, but mostly ice. Not unusual for North Carolina. That's kind of the way we roll here. At least eastern North Carolina. Western gets snow in the mountains, but in the Piedmont and the east, it's always ice.
And it doesn't seem you can't turn on the news today or yesterday or in the last week without hearing about ICE, whether it be literal or the immigration customs enforcement. And that's going to be a
Or,
large topic of what we talk about
or
today.
calling Greenland the wrong name. You know, it just happens every day, everywhere, all the time.
So, which is, so there was another ICE shooting on, I believe it was Saturday. It's sorry, the snow's got me off of my days. Today's Monday, and I mean it's the middle of the day. What's going on, right? There was another ICE shooting. There's video from it. It's I'll leave my personal comments to the end. I want to get around and talk about this with the crew today. Matt, I want to start with you. A, what did you think about the situation, right? The shooting that took place in Minneapolis or Minnesota, and the response by DHS, and how it's almost like kind of Orwellian the way that they respond to it. But I wanted to get your take on it to start out.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I guess one take would just be thank goodness we have video evidence now, right? I mean, Christy Nome and several, if you go by the officials, the people in charge, and you read the statements that they put out, if you didn't have video evidence to tell you otherwise, you would assume that this guy shows up, pulls a gun, brandishes a gun, pulls a gun on ICE, is impeding their work, and probably is there for planning a mass shooting. And he's a domestic terrorist. And thank God the brave ICE officers were able to restrain him and protect their fellow officers and the citizenry by shooting him 10 times after he was disarmed. It's really Orwellian, I think, Jeff, is a great way of putting it, because thank goodness we have video evidence that is really contradictory to what we were told by our government.
Yeah. So, Walter, did you watch the video?
I did. I watched.
It's hard to watch, isn't it? I mean, honestly, I watched it a couple times, and I just like it kind of gave me like a little sick feeling in my stomach watching that video.
Yeah, it's certainly what I would say. And I'm an attorney here in Wyoming, and looking at this from afar, it's a tragedy. I mean, I think first of all, right? I mean, this guy clearly was he was an ICU nurse, worked at the VA. He was there, not, I would say, aggravating folks. A woman gets pushed. He goes to help her. There's pepper spray. He gets taken to the ground. I would say, he was resisting a little bit. Somebody comes in. They yell gun. He gets disarmed. So the gun gets pulled out. And I've seen videos that seem to indicate that when the officer disarmed him, he may have accidentally discharged the firearm, which caused the other officers to then shoot the victim. And, clearly just, horrible negligence, right? Did they intend to murder him? Was this murder? Was it, a negligent, homicide. That's for a jury to decide. I mean, I think one of the things people have to remember is ultimately all of the facts are going to get put before a jury. And, we have the least worst judicial system in the world. And people are going to come together and they're going to figure this out. I think there's a couple of things here, right? Multiple statements can be true, right? It is simultaneously true that the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis are resistant to federal efforts to enforce immigration rules, regulations.
Well, so
And
hold on.
pursuant to the anti-commandeering doctrine, that's allowed, right? The federal government does not get to commandeer state troops for federal purposes. And that is true and legal, right? I think that's important. What is also true is I think the administration has a lot of mud on their face because they came out and, as Matt said, lied through their teeth, right? I mean, they just lied about what happened here, and we are lucky that we have video, and so we can kind of Monday morning quarterback this. But I will just keep going back to, ultimately it's for a jury to decide. It's not for us. Go ahead.
So we're going to come to that, like the radical ends in the second segment here of like how do we get to this point. But I want to stay focused on like this shooting, how it took place, and the results of it. Roger, what was your take on it? You watched that video, I assume, right?
Yeah, I've watched the video, and in keeping with the comments that have been made so far, and extending it back, as I like to apply history, right? I think about this thing. I think about applied history routinely. So I'm thinking, would Hitler or Mussolini have been as successful in doing what they did if the people had had handheld video recording at the time? Is this the tool that will prevent a would-be authoritarian from consolidating power completely? I mean, is this the thing that's going to save us this time and perhaps make it extremely difficult for a dictator to be successful in other advanced economies that also have these devices going forward? I hope that's the case. I certainly hope that we're going to be able to use the evidence provided by the citizen journalist, right? I hear a lot Elon Musk and his supporters talk about citizen journalists on X. We've got citizen journalists out there with cell phones taking this video, and hopefully that's going to be the thing that prevents it from going to a place that's irredeemable, right? But I kind of think ICE is irredeemable already. Yes, the shooting is horrible. This shooting was horrible. The previous one was horrible. They are deciding that they don't need judicial warrants to break into people's homes. That's horrible. The whole thing, it's a pattern of escalation that's been going on for some time now, and we've reached a point where they feel comfortable murdering citizens. It's not a good thing, and it's just part of the escalation process.
So I can see that Walter disagrees with you, so I'm going to get to him in just a second. But I guess we see these commercials. I don't know if you guys see these on your social media or your TVs, but there's commercials like to hire ICE agents. It's like the government is putting this on a regular basis. They're like hiring people. They're like, we really need ICE agents to come out and work from Homeland Security. And the way that Walter was describing it, and the way that you see that these, in all the videos, whether they're shooting somebody or not, these people seem unprepared to deal with what they're being tasked to deal with. And I think that might be the biggest issue. I think there's two main issues. When you've got Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, because let's not forget Stephen Miller is kind of like the kingpin of this whole operation here. And they have this very negative attitude that they cast down on the immigrants or what they're doing about the people that they're taking out. They're saying we're doing good because we're taking bad people out of the community. And while that might be partially true, it's not 100% true. And when you take your bad attitude and you apply it to good people who are just trying to live their lives, now you think about it, like the whole Donald Trump, Stephen Miller masculinity debate that we've been having over the last year and a half. Here was a man who was defending a woman who got pushed by this big brutish masked ICE agent, okay, who got pushed to the side, and he's just reacting in the moment as a man would, like, hey, don't push that girl. Like you be a real, I'm your type. Let's go, right? And he gets taken down and and shot, and killed right there on the spot. And as Walter was saying, maybe it's not intentional. Maybe it was just bad training. This guy is completely unprepared for the job. So Matt, I want to ask you two questions here before I get to Walter's dissent of Roger. Is A, do you think that it's possible that it's just like, is it the top-down attitude, or is it bad training, or maybe a little of both? And B, should we abolish ICE?
Well, look, I think the fundamental problem is that they shouldn't be in Minnesota. They shouldn't be doing this. I think Trump should secure the border, which he basically has. And then I think you could have strategic targeted programs where you go in and take out the worst of the worst, but that's not what this is. So I think fundamentally the problem is they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But in terms of the training, first of all, even if you were a veteran police officer or, let's say, border agent, that doesn't mean you're prepared to deal with like crowd control and protests and riots and people blowing whistles at you 24 hours a day and people with video cameras filming you all the time. That takes to be able to maintain your professionalism, enforce the law, and that environment would be very difficult. I think that Trump and Noam and others have put them in a very difficult position. And you're an unwelcome guest in that state. Like, they do not want you there. The citizens who are there, the protesters don't want you there. The governor doesn't want you there. The local law enforcement doesn't want you there. There's no way that someone who's used to dealing on the border, even if they were a veteran and had been trained for that, has the capacity to be just like dropped in Chicago or Minnesota dealing with a citizenry who doesn't want them there, who, by the way, is filming them. So it's a thankless job. And then to your point, Jeff, some of these people aren't veterans. Some of these people are well, I think some of them are actually like, people who were actually involved in like January 6th, but some of them were people who just like needed a gig and they got a $50,000 bonus, and they got dropped in the middle of this. So it's all the stars have aligned for something bad to happen.
We should give a $50,000 bonus to hiring more congressional representatives, and then maybe they can write immigration law, and we wouldn't have to hire all these federal agents to go out and enforce rules that are kind of ambiguous already, anyways. But Walter, I know that you disagreed with Roger a little bit there. What do you got to say about that? You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I think that we have I'm just going to first agree with Matt. I think that we have a recipe for disaster. I think that training is an issue. Jeff, as you point out, there's no question in my mind that, they're on a hiring spree and to try to deal with this. My concern is if it's not ICE, then who? Because if there is a policy of removing people who are present illegally, who should do that if not ICE? Is there another federal agency that should do that? If the state government is unwilling to do it, who should do it? And people might say, oh, well, let's just tie funding, state funding to them actually enforcing the laws. And you can do that to a certain extent. They could condition, I think, federal funding of some of the roads in order to, kind of force the state's hand on this. But I think the real risk, and because there was a recent Supreme Court decision that said that Trump can't deploy the National Guard, and he's already mentioned this, he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act and deploy the Army, U.S. Army, and that is, I think, more worrisome to me. However, they would be perhaps more professionally trained than this like mass hiring spree of ICE agents. But But I think that this is important, right? The immigration question is of paramount importance for the question of the size of the House, right? Because the apportionment that happens on the basis of the census every 10 years is based on the number of people present. That's the way the laws are currently written. Donald Trump, through the Commerce Department, attempted to put a citizenship question on the census back in 2018, 2019. And that was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court. Query whether or not Congress could legislate such a question. But there's a very close tie, and I know we're going to get into this, to kind of political dominance between the two parties vis-a-vis immigration. And so I think the question is, what tools can you give Republicans to peaceably allow people to be deported in a place, in a state, or in a city where the local government is not interested in that because it doesn't serve their political interests. And I don't know that I don't have a great answer. I think the question remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Can I just say real
Yeah, go
quick,
ahead.
and I won't go on too long. It's a very difficult. What I would love to see is a leader emerge who can build consensus and even go across party lines and say to Democrats, I love the Patrick Swayze. If you've ever seen the movie Roadhouse, where he's the cooler, he's not a bouncer, he's the cooler, and he says, if someone's acting up in here, we're gonna go talk to him, we're gonna ask him to leave, and we'll be nice. And if they won't leave, we're gonna walk them to the door, but we'll be nice as we're walking them to the door. And if they don't want to walk, we're gonna walk them, and I'll come over and help, and we're gonna both be nice as we, I would love to see someone who was a leader, and maybe it wouldn't work. Maybe the Democrats wouldn't cooperate with them, but I'd like to see it tried where it's like, look, we're the federal government. We're in charge of the border. That's shut down. We are protecting the border now. But when it comes to deporting people who are illegally, we need to build a coalition of local folks who are going to help us. We win hearts and minds, and we're going to do it in a professional, compassionate way. If someone's here illegally, we are going to deport them. You may not like that. We're not going to be mean about it. We're not going to tear kids away from their parents. We're going to do it in a responsible way. Obviously, the devil's in the details, but that's the leader that I think we need.
That sounds a lot like the way Obama handled it. He deport more people in his first term than Trump did, and he's deported more than anybody in history at this point. And he did it without violating people's civil rights, largely. You didn't hear about it on the news. And he did it without committing murders. What you're describing sounds a lot like what Obama did during his term. Just saying.
Well, there's a reason they called him No Drama Obama. I think he didn't want the drama, and Trump loves the drama. And it's almost opposites.
He's causing the drama.
Yeah. So I was going to mention that as well, as Obama did deport just a way more people than anybody before him. And there's this great quote from Everyone Who Is Gone Is Here, a book by Jonathan Blitzer about the immigration issue starting in the 1970s up to current day. And it's from Obama. And he said, "Here's my problem. We live in a world with nation states. I have borders. You may believe that it's inherently unfair that a child born in El Salvador has completely different set of opportunities available and a completely different set of dangers than a child born in the US. And that's because it is unfair, and I can't fix that for you." And it's it's that type of rational thought process about immigration that we need to bring back into the fold. And I would argue that the immigration issue that we face today is very similar to the issue of slavery that we faced leading into the Civil War. And the main reason is because it affects the representative power in government. So I read this book recently, The Impending Crisis, 1848 to 1861, by David Potter. It's actually, there was another book called The Impending Crisis that was written leading up to the Civil War by a white Southerner who was anti-slavery but not necessarily pro-equality. His argument was that slavery hurt rural poor whites just as much as anybody else, and that's why the South should get rid of slavery. But David Potter, in his book, shows that slavery became a national crisis because Americans discovered, not because of the immorality, but because it destabilized the balance of political power in a system and they were unable to adapt. Immigration today faces a similar challenge, not necessarily just because of the moral failing, but because of the test of whether representative institutions can translate population into legitimate governments. And we see this with sanctuary cities. We see this with state and federal acts of arguments back and forth, as Walter was mentioning just a few minutes ago, about the challenges of the states and the federal governments of like who has jurisdiction here, whose rights here. We've seen it on both sides of the aisle. The state governments has asserted their right over federal authority in order to deport people, and we've seen state governments use their authority to keep illegal immigrants in their states. So like the battle is all told, and then you have the radical ends, like in the slavery debate, there was the radicals, the people, the fire eaters in South Carolina that thought that slavery was a positive good. And then the abolitionists who wanted to abolish slavery like that. The way that it was solved ultimately is you had a moderate like Abraham Lincoln came about, who was able to carve a middle ground and, create a new path. Kind of probably similar to what Matt's talking about. It was like, we need a leader. We need somebody who can talk about this issue rationally and find a way to solve it. And so I want to talk about this a little bit as far as the radical ends, right? Do you think that the way that Minnesota is handling this situation and, considering the corruption that's taking place with the immigration up there, is pushing back on the federal government hard to get out of their state going to be conducive to solving this issue, or is it just creating a bigger backswing? And same thing, the Stephen Miller and the Donald Trumps of the world, they believe that Democrats hold power through using illegal immigrants in the House of Representatives to tilt the balance of power in their direction. There is lots of studies and stuff on this. Ben Shapiro's mentioned this as well. So it's possible that that's true, although I don't think it can be technically proven. So how do you think the radicals play a factor in here, and where can we get a moderate position up the middle to actually solve this issue?
Well, I guess I'll jump in first. I do not buy the argument that Hispanics are Democratic voters that are predestined to support the welfare state. And indeed, Donald Trump in 2024 did very well with Hispanic voters. And I think it's because he promised to lower grocery prices on day one. That's what they cared about, just like a lot of Americans, probably most Americans. Inflation was the number one issue. And I think they truly didn't believe that he was going to go on this deportation rampage. They thought that he would go for the worst of the worst. And so I think that Hispanic voters are not going to be like African American voters. They're going to be like the Irish or the Italians. And so if they turn against Republicans, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's because Republicans thought they were going to turn against them and therefore instituted policies that were guaranteed to repel them. So first of all, I disagree with the Republican premise that they should be that worried about Hispanics who are coming here to for a better life. I do think, of course, that you should enforce the law, and certainly a government, a state has a right to enforce its borders. That's perfectly legitimate. To your question about Minnesota, like their role in this, and really, in my opinion, they have a couple of options. One option is to roll over and let Trump and the administration do whatever they want to do, and not serve as a check and balance, not exercise federalism. And then the other option is to do what they're doing now. And I do think, actually, that yes, to a certain degree, because the governor of Minnesota and because local officials there oppose what Donald Trump is doing, that does create kind of a permission structure for activists and protesters to be more likely to be on the streets. But in my opinion, I actually think that what's happening here is bigger than the immigration question, right? This is not just a question over should Donald Trump's mass deportation policies be implemented or not. It's a real question of should Donald Trump be checked or not? should he and his administration be able to implement whatever policies they want, unfettered, and really, I mean, this is a guy who tried to stop a free and fair election and a peaceful transfer of power. So I'm inclined to root for, other parts of our government, other institutions standing up to him just to set, a principle like, no, you will not tread on us.
I gotta jump in on the premise real quick, Jeff. So just because I want to steelman the Republican premise here, which is, I think in part, if you have sanctuary cities or sanctuary states that are basically encouraging illegal immigrants to flock there, they get counted in the census, but then those illegal immigrants don't actually vote. It's the Democrats who, actually reside there legally who do vote. And so they get additional representatives, but then the illegal immigrants actually aren't voting until, maybe at some point they do achieve legal status. And so, I do think there is an electoral imbalance that is happening or has historically happened. I look down to like Denver, right? So you have a very large illegal immigrant population that comes in, that bumps the number up for the census. That means theoretically maybe they steal a representative away from Texas or New Mexico, and with the capped house. And so, there's an extra representative that gets divvied up, but it's definitely going to be a Democrat because everyone who lives in the greater metro Denver area votes, heavily blue. So you might be right. I mean, I'm not saying that it's like cut and dry, but I do think there is a case to be made. So.
Yeah, so that was the point I was going to make, is it actually doesn't matter whether the Hispanics vote for Republicans or for Democrats. If they're illegal, they're typically not voting at all, but they do get counted in the census. And so that is the real argument here, is like when you create sanctuary cities and you circumvent federal law, which in a lot of circumstances they are, okay, and you bring in a whole bunch of people, you do exactly what Walter was describing. You change the balance of power in Congress, and you move a representative, because the House is capped, from maybe a Republican state to a Democratic state like California, and because like what Walter's talking about, the people that come there, the illegal immigrants, they're not voting. It's the people that are already there voting, and you create stronger, safer districts. We've talked about on the show before, Yvette Clarke out of New York. She specifically wanted migrants in her district so she wouldn't lose her seat. Okay. She was worried about New York losing a seat in Congress, and she wanted to bring more migrants to her district specifically so she wouldn't lose her seat. That is playing with the representative power in Congress. That's not necessarily representing people or doing their job, which ultimately is to solve this issue. Immigration has been an issue since the 1840s, when immigration really spiked in America. We saw nativism throughout the Republican Party during the Civil War, then post-Reconstruction. It's been an issue on and off consistently. My argument is the capped house actually resolved a little bit of that with the 1924 Immigration Act, which kind of stemmed the tide of immigration for a little bit of time, but it keeps peeking its head up, and it's something that we keep kicking a can down the road. And my argument here is it's because the radicals take play. They use the morality of the issue over top of the logistics of the issue. And my argument is you got to tie those two things together. Every single person that comes here deserves a right of representation. Okay. We have to determine what that is, and we have to create a pathway or rules and regulations for people to become citizens so they can vote for whoever they want to vote for. So I'm going to get off my soapbox a little bit. Sorry. Roger, what's your take on Minneapolis and the way they're handling it? Is it creating a bigger backlash, or is it their right to institute these protests and, pushing back on this?
It is absolutely their right. And I agree with Matt. The alternative is to just roll over and get, steamrolled. They are duty bound. The elected officials in Minnesota are duty bound to represent the people of their state, and the people of their state are demonstrating clearly by their presence in the streets that they do not want this stuff. And I have to ask, why is it that they're going after immigrants in Minnesota when there are there are orders of magnitude more immigrants, including illegal immigrants, in Texas, in Florida, in other states, in southern states. Why are they focused on Minnesota?
Well, they're
Right.
they're deporting in Texas. I think they're actually deporting at much higher rates in Texas, but there's no pushback, and so it's just not in the news. I think is, I mean, part of it.
So, and this idea that they have this gargantuan budget, they've highly militarized the force there at ICE, as was referred to earlier in this conversation, and they're doing all that stuff so that they can go after the worst of the worst. Have they? They have gotten some of the worst of the worst. They happen to sweep them up, and I guess they target some of these people. But they talk a lot about these gangs, MS-13, Tren de Agua, or some of the. I haven't heard anything about ICE taking down a big MS-13 cell or having a big roundup of Tren de Agua people in the city. Why aren't they going after these gangs? Why are they sweeping women off the street who the whole thing ends up in a murder, right? If you go after these gangs and people get murdered, there's going to be a lot less pushback from the public.
Well, my argument is they're doing this on purpose because they're just trying to create news. Kind of like Matt says, Donald Trump loves drama, right? Like, this isn't about solving a problem. This is about winning elections. This is about scaring people into, hiding away. And I think
it's also about pressure over the elected people in Minnesota. I see news reports of how they are delaying or cutting or holding back funds only for blue states. And you layer that on top of all this other stuff. It's authoritarian trying to use the force that he has available to get his way with people who resist his way. It's just another. This is a more egregious example because it spills over into people's lives, actual populations, but I see it as all part of a same pattern. It's a pattern of escalation against states that are resisting Donald Trump's strongman play.
Well, and so, to that point, and the point that I was trying to make about, the Civil War is like, this was the leading up to the Civil War. It was a series of escalations, right? Kansas-Nebraska Act, the Bleeding Kansas. David Potter says that the whole Kansas thing, while there was a lot of tragedy there, is one of the biggest propaganda efforts ever made by the anti-slavery force. And not that I'm knocking it. I mean, remember, John Brown went in there and just slaughtered a whole family for very little gain out of it. And he was lionized as a hero, although the 1860 Republican platform specifically said they did not support him, but it didn't stop the anti-slavery forces from lifting him up. It's all about creating emotion within people to drive action, right? And I don't necessarily know if that's the right way to go about things, because look where it led us in 1860. When you're driving, when it's a series of escalations about emotion, and I think that's what you got on both sides of the aisle right now. You've got a lot of emotion. And to Matt's point is you need a cooler. Where is the cooler? And so if you had a cooler, what's he going to come in the door and say, Matt? What's the cooler going to walk in the door and he's going to say, all right, you are frustrated with the illegal immigrants coming in sanctuary cities, and you're frustrated with the fact that we don't have, you're not giving these people rights. Let's talk. What's he going to say, Matt? How's he going to cool the tempers?
Well, the thing is, I think if anybody before Trump had done what Trump did, which is effectively shut down the border, then we wouldn't be in this place to begin with. I think there'd be other problems because Trump is inherently authoritarian. But Trump might not have ever even gotten elected if past presidents had been able to control the border the way Trump has. So I don't understand why Trump didn't just do that and kind of declare victory. And then you could work to do not mass deportation, but you could actually work to get rid of the worst of the worst. And I think the American people would be real happy with that. You don't really have to build a wall. You don't really have to go in and cause trouble and, disappear gardeners and nannies and abuelas. You don't have to do all that. In fact, it's not popular. this is very unpopular. This is not about winning elections because this is wildly unpopular. What
Well, I
Trump
can
is
help
doing.
you. I can help you understand why he's doing it. It's because the Supreme Court gave him immunity from official presidential actions. So he's going to do whatever the hell he wants to do and say it's official. I'm the president. That's why it's happening.
Well, I mean, I have other even sinister concerns about what he's doing, and it could be that he actually wants to invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law and all that. But that's probably too crazy and too conspiratorial.
No, it's
But
not.
well, we'll get there. We'll get
He
there.
is stark raving mad. He is stark raving
But just
mad.
but just for the
period.
sake of like, Jeff's question, like last question to me, like what would a responsible leader do? And I think the responsible thing is, number one, actually shut down the border, because I think the American people really were freaked out by the illegal immigration coming in. So if you do that, if you could demonstrate, that the border is secure, then if you literally just went after the worst of the worst, I don't think you would need to do the mass deportation. And I think there might be more of a consensus to get buy-in. But so to me, if you ask me, like, you're going to be president tomorrow, what is your number one job? I wouldn't say my number one job is getting rid of illegals. I wouldn't even say like my number one job is ending abortion or whatever. I would say like my number one job is restoring faith in America and calming things down. Like I think that's really what a leader ought to do. And then it's like, okay, well, but people really are worried about immigration. How can you do that? I just control the border, go for the worst of the worst, don't be a dick, don't kill citizens. I think you're not going to please Stephen Miller, but I bet you the vast majority of conservatives would be just fine with a Donald Trump. He'd probably be wildly popular now if he had governed this way instead of what he's doing.
So I'm gonna give a pitch for the cooler speech. It's really simple. It's a bill to repeal and replace the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act and to uncap the House. But within that, put a citizenship question on the census and count for apportionment purposes only citizens. And I think that it would get challenged. It would go to the Supreme Court, and so we would have to get an answer from the Supreme Court, see if they agree. But it would I think refocus the attention to where it needs to be, which is a question of representation. Why is this happening, and what can we do to fix it? Because I think one of the reasons they're so concerned about immigration is because of the capped house. And if we had an uncapped house, and if you were challenging whether or not Congress has the authority to ask a citizenship question, you refocus the authority on Congress, on the Supreme Court. And frankly, if it turns out we can have a citizenship question and the Supreme Court gives a blessing on that, frankly, it matters a little bit less if there are peaceful illegal immigrants in America, right? It suddenly becomes a non-important or an unimportant political question. And so, you can just focus on the worst of the worst, genuinely, right? I mean, there's no political reason to do anything otherwise. So that would be my pitch to, Thomas Massie or whoever, wants to pick up the reins.
Yeah. So what I would say about Donald Trump is like, why is this? I don't think he's really in charge. Like I know like he's in charge at the things he wants to be in charge at. And he wants to be president because he likes to be president, but he's not really interested in doing the job. And I don't really think he's thinking that deeply about these things. I think that he is the type of person who, as long as he gets what he wants, he's happy to delegate all of his authority to anybody below him. And I think post January 6th, what you've seen is the only people that will touch him with a 10-foot pole are kind of crazy authoritarian types like Stephen Miller. So Stephen Miller has full reins to basically institute whatever he wants. I mean, look at Kristen Noem at DHS. She looks completely out of her depth running that agency, right? Look at the FBI, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. Like they're just not even qualified for their jobs, right? They can't handle the responsibility. And when you do that, that's I talk about this, The government runs on pork and patronage. And for those who don't know, pork are the contracts and money that's doled out to localities for deals, and the patronage are jobs, right? And there's no way to get around this, okay? But every once in a while, your government becomes spoiled, right? That's what they talked about, the spoils of government that Andrew Jackson talked about. And spoiled power is really dangerous because you're giving contracts and jobs to people who do not deserve them. They're not responsible for them. And that's where you get these authoritarian, radical people instituting these policies, hiking up emotion as opposed to solving problems, as they're supposed to be doing. So that's my argument. I just don't think he's really interested in doing the job, and he's just delegated all his authority away.
The only caveat I would put to that, or the only disagreement I would have, is I don't think he's surrounded by people because they're the only people who want to be near him. I think he is. In the first administration, he had people who were more establishment types, who were more moderate and more cautious, and frankly, more experienced, more wise. And they would sometimes try to stop him or talk him out of things or slow walk things he wanted to do. And I think all of those people have been purged. And so the people who are left are people who are the opposite of that. And they're not going to tell him no. And they're certainly not going to try to slow him down. Now, it could be that someone like a Stephen Miller is accelerating what Trump would want to do. But I don't think it's because no one else will touch him with a 10-foot pole. I think it's because he got rid of the people who would be any sort of a check on his judgment.
Well, there is
he has immunity, and he knows
there
it.
is wait, look, he doesn't have immunity. The Congress can impeach him at any time. Congress has power. They have power. They have power. And I've made this argument before. If JD Vance wants to be something special, he has the greatest opportunity to become something special in American history. Okay, because what's going to happen after the election is the Democrats are going to take the House. The Senate's going to be split. It could go either way, right? And JD Vance could support impeachment, okay? And the House would clearly pass him if he can wrangle enough Republicans and say, look, we're going to support this guy, and I'm going to go back to being the old J.D. Vance. No more populist J.D. Vance. I'm going to go back to being the constitutional Republican J.D. Vance that you knew before. This was all just an act so I could do this thing now. And now we're going to solve these issues because Donald Trump has divided us so much that people are willing to come to the table and debate this if I can get him impeached and remove him from office. Now,
that's a conspiracy fantasy.
That's the problem with that is JD Vance has surrounded himself with people like Curtis Yarvin who believe in this, that don't really believe in republicanism at all. They want to institute a monarchy. And I don't know how JD Vance fits into that exactly, but, I don't know. But either way, Congress can impeach Donald Trump. There is a check on his power, and Congress doesn't do it. And if people want to do it, call your congressman, call your Republican congressman. If you have a Republican congressman, call your Republican congressman and say, just impeach this guy. Congress needs to assert its authority. Oh, by the way, also uncap the House.
I think the one thing I think there's two things here that are important. One thing that's driving Donald Trump is a desire to not be put in federal prison. And I think there was a real misstep by Democratic leaders in the political persecutions of him on I think relatively thin grounds. There was also a state prosecution of him, maybe slightly even less or more thin grounds. And but there are tons of character flaws. I mean, he did assault the woman; he was convicted of that. But the political prosecutions are I think a motivating factor, and I am worried that he's going to cancel the midterm elections. I've heard that from somebody that I consider to be credible, and I think that should be a real concern. And what is our plan if he tries to do that? I think luckily, and Matt Beat, one of our board members, said is elections are actually super distributed, right? It would actually be really difficult to cancel elections, like quote unquote cancel elections. He might declare martial law in one state or another, but it would be really difficult for him to cancel elections in all 50 states. The other thing that I think is important, I just personally, I judge the sin, not the sinner. And, Stephen Miller has said some terrible things. Donald Trump has done some terrible things. I don't think that they're irredeemable. I don't think that any of these people or any particular person is irredeemable. And it's when we start treating them as being irredeemable that we create a self-fulfilling prophecy and they become irredeemable, right? And so, I think that this is something that the left has done, ad nauseum with the cancel culture. And it's just like, somebody does something bad and it's like, nope, you're not allowed to be a person, in public service ever again. And I think that it's a dangerous, slippery slope in it. And again, I think it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I think it's important that we focus on calling out particular actions that are reprehensible, illegal, and not just saying that, these people are authoritarian. Say, well, they've taken certain steps, certain actions that have certain, authoritarian bents to them, and if they continue, that would be problematic. And if certain actions are taken, there's a red line upon which we must take certain steps. So I'll turn it back.
I mean, I kind of agree with you there. I mean, it's kind of like when you're raising kids, right? If you constantly are telling your kids that they're bad, they're just going to be bad. They're like, what's the point of being good? Everything that I do is I'm told that I'm bad for. So like, why am I going to even try? They're going to go hang out with the bad kids. They're going to do bad things. It's like you said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Hold on.
So we should not impeach, because that would mean somebody, to use Walter's language, they would not be able to serve in public office ever again in life. They would be termed irredeemable if they've been impeached and convicted. So now you're saying that we should not impeach and convict because
that's the only way.
Yes, make them feel they're irredeemable.
No, that's the actual way. If they break the law, if they actually break the law, then there is a process by which you can convict them of that particular transgression, which by law prohibits them from doing something else. But just screaming that they are, this way or that way, and they should not be allowed to ever run again, but not going through the formal process, that's the problem, right?
When it's tried twice, and the guy is acquitted twice, what then? What do
you uncap the house? So you uncap the house, so you get real impeachment proceedings. I mean, the problem is that impeachment has become a farce.
What do you do today? What do you do right now?
What we're doing right now.
All right. So go ahead, Matt.
I'm just saying, I would recommend. I'm interviewing him later today. Jonathan Rauch of The Atlantic. Well, he's not of The Atlantic. I think he's of Brookings, but he wrote a piece at The Atlantic saying, yes, after further review, Donald Trump is a fascist. And this isn't just a flippant, 750 word column. Like, he brought the receipts. I mean, to the degree that we can define the word fascist, which is somewhat elusive, he really goes through, I don't know, there's like a 20-point checklist of things that, would be reasonably considered part of what would make somebody a fascist. And he goes through, and he's got the receipts. Trump has basically done and said everything that you might do or say to become a fascist. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of different flavors of fascism, from Mussolini to Franco. I'm not saying that Trump is going to start a Holocaust or something, but I would say definitely read that piece, and I would be impressed if someone could actually write a rebuttal that would disprove what Rauch has laid out there.
Well, so what I was going to say before is there always comes a point where, actions have consequences, right? And that's my point about impeachment. And like, I think what Walter's saying is there is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that goes into what we're going to talk about next, which is the media. What's the media's responsibility in all this, right? A lot of times we are casting judgment upon people and events before we know all the facts. And a lot of that, you talk about the citizen journalist, and Matt, you probably know more about this than any of us here, is like, what's the mindset inside the media to get the story out? Are they trying to take their time and make sure they know what they're talking about beforehand? Or are they worried about losing viewership because now everybody's got a cell phone and it's going to be all over and you're going to be the last one to report, right? So like, when you're doing this, the self-fulfilling prophecy is casting judgment before you all know facts and saying that somebody is bad or irredeemable before you've had any type of judgment, to the point of like an impeachment proceedings, right? But what is the responsibility of the media here in delineating those facts or events to us, the people, so we can then decide?
I mean, I think it's to try to get it right. But and look, let me just start off with the preface or the caveat. Like I've been a big critic of the media for many, many years. I mean, anybody who was ever in the conservative movement or was a conservative blogger or a columnist has a history of being critical of the liberal media. And I do think that part of the reason that we got Trump is that like the liberal media said that Mitt Romney had a war on women and had binders full of women, and said that like Rick Perry was a racist because there was a rock on his ranch that had a bad name before he owned the ranch. I mean, it was like, you know, so there's a long pattern, and I think that the public became inured to warnings of the media when the media would say this person's a fascist. Or like, well, you said that about Mitt Romney, you said that about John McCain, so you know why should I believe you now? So I've been very critical of the media, but I think at this point now, to be honest with you, I'm much more sympathetic of the media, and I think that you know take what happened this weekend in Minneapolis. I think that because you have an administration the administration is not waiting for an investigation. They immediately came out and called this guy a domestic terrorist. They immediately came out and said that he basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, pulled a gun on ICE agents and yada yada yada. I think that the media did a very good job everywhere I saw, including the conservative outlets like the Wall Street Journal, and pretty quickly watching the video and from multiple angles and not waiting a week to do this, but very quickly saying, based on the video evidence that we have seen, and unless there's more evidence that we are not privy to, it seems like the administration is lying to us. And this is what really happened based on the evidence that we have seen. So I think that they acted very quickly, but I think that they also acted responsibly, both in the sense that if you don't report the truth, lies will take root. False narratives will become reality if responsible people do not get the truth out there. So it's a tough job, not as tough probably as being a police officer, where you're making very quick decisions of life and death. But it's a lot of responsibility, and I think that recent journalism has been pretty darn good.
Yeah, I watched the coverage as well. I would agree with you on that. Roger, what's your take? What's the media's responsibility in these escalating events?
Well, I don't have anything contrary to what's been said already. There's always, like with every job, and they're certainly true in my field of work, but there's a trade-off with everything. And you described it well. Journalists have a responsibility, their professional ethics, their own sense of what's right and wrong, and they're going to take the time to try and do what journalists do. Person on the street isn't going to do that, but the lie takes over before the journalist can put the truth out. I have never understood, and I'm kind of curious. I don't know if anybody here is a regular viewer of Fox or Newsmax or any of those. I have no idea how they've handled this shooting in Saturday of Preddy. Do any of you know how Fox is reporting it? Are they saying that the video contradicts the administration, or are they just ignoring it?
I did see one clip. I did see one. I could probably pull it up on Twitter. I did see one clip of, I think it was Trey Gowdy. Let's see. Trey Gowdy said on Fox News, "We certainly should not be labeling him as a domestic terrorist who was going to execute cops. There is no evidence to support that." So, for what it's worth, one guest, one time on Fox said the right thing.
Yeah, and not in prime time, so his reach would have been somewhat limited. So this is a difficult question for me to try and get my arms around, because I've always insisted on having a varied media diet. It's TV, it's radio, it's written, it's U.S. based, it's non-U.S. based. Yes, I'll read BBC and Der Spiegel and Le Monde and whatever else. So I'm always trying to triangulate the truth, and that's how I approach life in the world. I don't trust anybody. I'm a born skeptic, and I've been trained as a CPA on top of that, so I don't trust anybody. I don't trust my mother.
Walter, what's your take? What's the media's responsibility in this?
Well, I think the citizen journalists on X did a pretty good job, pretty quickly, sourcing all the video and compiling it, and showing that there were, the statements of the administration were contradicted by the video evidence, and you saw, I think, a number of conservatives have broken rank with President Trump to say, hey, what you're saying here just isn't true, and the NRA came out and said, there was a ASUA from, or AUSA from California, I think, who basically said, if you bring a gun to a protest, you're liable to get shot, right? And all the gun rights activists are just like, no, hold on. There's this thing called the Second Amendment, and so I think that traditional media, they play a role. They're a first draft of a second opinion, right? And I think that the same is true of citizen journalists, right? It's a first draft of a second opinion. And my view is that the first opinion really should come from your congressional representatives, right? I mean, they've got really good, they should have access to this information to perform oversight of executive actions. And that, if I'm going to second guess what the administration has done prior to, a judge and jury adjudicating it, it's Congress really that has the authority to say, what happened or didn't happen. I checked, my Congresswoman has not made a statement about this yet, to my knowledge. And so that's disappointing. And, I think in an uncapped House, we would get a much bigger role of representatives' offices playing, that first draft of a first opinion, right? Coming from our legislators saying, here's what is and is not. And then, we've got media to check them and cross-check that with what the administration is saying, and then finally what the judiciary says. And then somebody will, like Matt, will write a book about it in 10 years, and then we'll have yet another version that'll be a little bit more complete. So that's my view.
Yeah,
My congressperson also hasn't made a statement on it.
So, I mean, I agree. Like, you definitely should be able to get to your information from your congressperson. And if we did have an uncapped House, it'd be a lot easier to get in touch with them. I don't necessarily know if it's always going to be your first. I think it should be your most consistent, because, events happen quickly. You're not, one person is going to represent more than one person. It's going to be hard to get the information from them. I think, to what Roger was asking about of Fox, I did flip Fox on for about 30 minutes and I didn't cover it. So I watched Fox for roughly about 30 minutes and it didn't come on the TV, which is a problem in my opinion. And then, to the point of what Walter was saying about X, and I don't know if you guys experienced this, but my timeline, I don't ever see anything I want to see on X anymore. I didn't see any of this. I have to go search Minneapolis protests, Minneapolis shooting to get any of it to come up. I never see anything. All I see are ads for Viagra and hustlers and all these different things. I never see anything substantial anymore. I almost never even go on the platform because it's just a scam at this point. And I say that as we are broadcasting live on X, but but it's the reality. Something's jammed up with the algorithm. It's not really interested in delineating information that you want to see. It's delineating the information that they want you to see, which is kind of the same point about Fox, which is kind of the issue with the media in a lot of circumstance, which goes to Roger's point is you've got to be able to decentralize your information. You need to get it from lots of different points and triangulate the truth on your own, if you want to have any success for that. Do you guys have problems with your algorithm?
Well, I think you have to pay for it. So I mean, if you pay for the premium plus, this is true.
I do pay for X.
You pay for the medium subscription, so you still get ads. If you pay for the top one, you don't get ads. But here's what I'll say. good information has always been expensive. I don't think that there's a way to get away from that without advertisers influencing the decisions of the information that's going to be presented to you. That's the problem with cable TV. That's the problem with ad-driven radio. It's the problem with anything that's ad-driven. Ultimately, advertisers are going to be curating what information makes its way to you. You have to pay for good information. And I haven't figured out another business model. But if you do, Jeff, let me know.
Well, I mean, I guess my argument is like I follow a whole bunch of people on X that cover this stuff, and like Matt. I've been following Matt for years. I met Matt on Twitter. I never see Matt in my feed ever. He never comes up in my feed. He was one of the most consistent people in my feed for years, and now he's never in there. I followed the Dispatch. They never come up in my feed. I follow all these different places. They never come up in my feed, but all these people that I've never followed keep coming up in my feed, and I pay for the product. And if your argument is, oh, you got to pay more, then what are they doing but scamming me, asking me to pay them monthly, but then creating a shoddy product so that I have to buy more from them? That's not business. That's a scam. That's not confidence.
Okay.
That's not capitalism.
You have to go to following, not for you. It sounds like you're looking on your feed and for you. If it's not people you follow, it's not going to show up in following.
No, I'm on the following. I know how to use the platform. I'm on there. Anyways,
I'm somewhat skeptical at this moment.
I don't even see you on my feed, bud. Like only on the.
Well,
I got this. I follow this one person. It's they got like 700,000 followers or whatever. They're in California. They were constantly on my feed, and so what I started to do is I started to unfollow a whole bunch of people that I didn't like want to see it. But I always get like random people that I have followed over the years, and I just keep on unfollowing them so I can find the people I actually want to follow. All right. Well, this was nice. I appreciate it. Matt, coming on the show. This was really great. Go around the horn. Any final words on the topics that we had today? Matt, I'll start with you.
Oh, geez. Well, I guess I heard that Tom Homan is being sent out to Minneapolis, and it seems like this is Trump can't back down from what he's doing, but he can change things up. And so I think this is a message to Nome that she is not doing well. Trump's not happy with her, and I think when Tom Homan is sort of the voice of reason and the compassionate conservative, we've arrived.
He's the cooler.
Yeah, he's Patrick Swayze.
Roger.
Well, I cannot suppress my curiosity any longer. Matt, I see at least 2 guitar necks in the background behind you. Mm-hmm. What do you play? What kind of music?
I'll do a little picking here if I can.
Oh, he's going to pick for us. He's braver than I am.
Probably way out of tune. And I lost my pick. Oh, here it is. Hang on. I won't do any singing, but so we got blues. We got
blues, man.
Well, I'm a little rusty, guys, and I'm nervous.
Right.
But I do a little, a lot of. I like acoustic. I used to play in bands years ago, so I do a little. I mean, I actually do play a little bit, but mostly it's just really cool-looking backdrop for my my recordings.
Well, I started playing about 2.5 years ago, and I play surf and slide. Is pretty much.
Oh, that's cool.
I picked.
I never got into
just because my children wanted me to, so I learned a couple of other things. But I focus on surf and slide. Right now, I'm trying to learn Redneck Friend, David Lindley's part from Redneck Friend.
I don't know that one.
But
I do like. So you're doing sort of like 50s, 60s sort of slide guitar stuff. Is that right?
Well, slide guitar is all from back to the 20s. The originals were the Delta Bluesmen, Robert Johnson, all that. But the surf stuff is more like the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And all the Ventures and Shantays and all that jazz, the Astronauts, even some odd names. The Japanese had a huge surf rock scene. I had no idea until I started this. Anyways, so that's what I do. And when I see guitars, I'm curious.
Bluegrass, I think the dobro came from Hawaii. and the mandolin came from Italy. So it's such a interesting, diverse background, and how that ended up in Appalachia. I'm sure there's been books written on that.
Oh yeah, yeah. The whole idea of slide guitar came out of Hawaii. The way they play slack key and slide over there on their laps. So, anyways,
I just saw the movie. I
that's
just
my
saw the movie
curiosity.
Sinners, which I think is nominated for Best Picture. My wife and I
saw that
watched it
too.
yesterday, and there's a lot of good slide guitar in that. So check that out.
I will.
It is. I will. I've also watched this film, and great music. Pretty, it is a horror film. I guess
Yeah.
it is. It definitely will get your heart pumping. Not just the music. So, be ready. I'll give some final thoughts. So first, I went to undergrad at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, home of the Blues, and so I love to hear that, and that brings me back. I was just back there recently, and I recently learned that so Rhodes now has 2 political alumni that are in national politics. I'm going to give you one and see if anyone else can guess the other one. So one is Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Does anyone know who the other one is? Okay, it is Jasmine Crockett.
Oh,
wow.
I actually did know
Nice.
that. Now that you think of it, now you mention it.
Yeah, I got like an alumni
Opposites.
email. Yeah, I got an alumni email saying that they've got both of them are coming to campus this year, and I thought that was funny. Right, talk about opposites or not
That's a
maybe
binary
opposites,
switch
but
for
definitely
sure.
definitely different ends of the spectrum. Yeah, I was talking with my family about this. We were texting about the everything that's been going on with ICE, and my sister said something just like, we've got to absolutely just we just need to be in the streets, defund, chanting defund ICE, and my pitch to all those folks is, the people who would defund ICE is Congress, right? And there's a first step to any reform, which is to uncap the House. And my brother's like, well, what about it's like, seems like a chicken and egg. It's like if we don't uncap the House, we can't get any of these things. I'm like, yeah. So it's not a chicken and egg problem. It's a 1, 2, 3 problem. Like, learn how to count, and you start with uncapping the House, and then we can do many other amazing things. But you have to relieve that pressure in the centralization of power in party leadership and committee leadership in the House of Representatives, because they're controlling, legislation, they're controlling the floor votes, they're controlling, what the freshman representatives get to say, and they're controlling their ability to represent you. And Jeff sent around a really good piece about, remaking Congress from within, and talking about the importance of factions and doing that. And I think that there's a really strong opportunity for a faction that is focused on AI and uncapping the House. And because I think AI drives this issue home, that, truth is only going to get more slippery as we progress into this AI future. And the only solution that I really can imagine is having really quality representation in the House to help us navigate these uncharted waters. And I don't, the executive branch isn't going to do that, and I don't think the judiciary is quick enough to do it. And we need a federal legislative branch that can help us navigate the uncharted waters of this Trump administration, the next administration, but most importantly, AI. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah. So shout out to James Wallner, by the way, who's the one that wrote that paper. It's like 16 pages. It's a PDF. I tweeted it out if you want to look at it too. It's fantastic, and I think James Wallner, is like Kevin Kosar, Philip Wallach. They're really, really smart academic people who understand how politics in Congress works, and they're giving us a lot of really great ideas. And people need to start to listen. And to your point about factions, I've been meeting with. I spent the last week meeting with No Cap Fund volunteers. I've had 3 volunteer meetings. We got No Cap Fund chapters going up in Michigan, New Jersey, and now Oregon. And this is how I describe our mission, right? Like, we are a single issue bipartisan organization focused on repealing the 1929 Permanent Apportionment Act. Okay. Our goal is to uncap the House. All of the different factions, right? There's all these different people. Our job is to pull everybody into our faction. Okay. Make our faction big enough to get it repealed, right? Once it's repealed after the 2030 census, they'll be forced to have to write a new apportionment bill, right? And everybody will go back into their factions and they'll all have their arguments about what the numbers should be and how we should do it. And that's just kind of how Congress works. But it's a first step, right? It's a first step. You have to repeal that. You have to get rid of it first. And if you want to help, you can go to our website, www.y435.org. You can sign up to be a volunteer and run one of those chapters. You can make a donation, and you can sign our declaration for representation so we can go and tell our representatives, look, this is an issue that people care about. You can also go there and look, we have a form email. You can copy and paste it, punch in your information, and send it to your representatives so they know that you care about this issue. Ask them to take their job seriously. This is in the Constitution. It's one of the most important things that they're supposed to do. They can argue and fight about whatever they want to do afterwards, but this has to be done. So with that, I want to thank Matt again for coming on the show. If you haven't checked out his books, Too Dumb to Fail or Filthy Rich Politicians, I'm actually going to go back and reread Too Dumb to Fail now that it's like 10 years later, because it was 2016 that came out, or 2015.
Yep.
So it's
January
like
of 2016. It's 10 years, exactly 10 years old.
That was the book that kind of sparked my political interest. It was one of the first political books that I ever read. And he has got a mind for predicting the future, ladies and gentlemen. So you should go check it out. I'm sure it'd be a great reread. So thank you again for coming on the show.
Matt is the voice of reason in an unreasonable world, says Billy HR2. So I have to agree, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. It was a blast.
He's the cooler. That's what Matt's the cooler. All right. Peace and love and representation.
Representation.